For 12 years, she lived invisible. There were no wounds to see, but her body bled. And with the blood, dignity drained away, hope, dreams, the longing to be touched without fear or shame. For 12 years, every touch was forbidden. Every glance was judgment. She became a shadow among the people, forgotten by doctors, dismissed by religion, rejected by culture. But one day, she heard about him. Not a priest, not some healer, but a man whose very footsteps healed and whose words awakened the soul. And she made a decision. If I can just touch the edge of his robe, this is not just a story of healing. It is the story of silent faith that dared to defy the world. Today, you're going to see what happens when faith touches the impossible. For 12 years, she had no name, only pain. She was known simply as the unclean woman, the one who bled. A constant flow, invisible to the eye, but relentless to the soul. Every drop was a sentence. She couldn't touch anyone, couldn't enter the temple, couldn't even sit where others sat. Her body was a battlefield, not just physical, but spiritual and emotional. This illness invaded her days like a curse, and words of compassion had long since ceased. What remained was silence, and the eyes of people who looked away from hers. She spent everything, every coin, every hope. Doctors, many; solutions, none. Some used her as a test. Others blamed her. Religion said she was unclean. Society said she was inconvenient. Medicine said she was incurable. But her body said she was alive, that something inside her still refused to die. In the early years, she wept daily, then only on birthdays. Eventually, not even time or pain surprised her anymore. Life had become a waiting room, with no date, no cure, no happy ending. But then, a rumor, a conversation at the market. A different rabbi came to town. He heals with a glance. He speaks to lepers. He doesn't avoid the unclean. She listened. For the first time in years, she heard something that didn't hurt. And something sparked. Not hope, not yet. It was too fragile for that. It was a question. What if? What if he sees me? What if he is real? What if he touches me? But she knew no one could touch him. She was unclean. Her presence in a crowd was scandalous, and yet she thought, if I can just touch the edge of his robe. No words, no attention, just one touch. That thread wasn't just fabric, it was courage woven with faith. She covered her face, cloaked herself in the shadows of shame, and took her first step. She entered the crowd like someone stepping into a sanctuary, with fear, with faith, with urgency. Every step was a risk. If someone recognized her, she could be cast out, maybe even stoned. But the fear of staying the same was greater than the fear of what could happen.
She moved through shoulders, robes, and voices. No one noticed the small woman, veiled to her eyes, carrying something she had almost forgotten: faith. And then she saw him, not his face, not his eyes, only his robe. But that was enough. She knelt. The world fell silent, and with a trembling hand, she touched.
It wasn't a long touch. It wasn't strong. It was a breath of contact, a second not belonging to men, but to eternity. And in that instant, something happened. She knew, before joy, before relief, before reaction. She knew the flow stopped. The emptiness ceased. The silence within her was filled with a presence no doctor, no prayer, no hope had ever brought. She had been touched by something greater than pain. Who touched me? The question sliced through the noise like a blade of light. The disciples chuckled, puzzled. Master, the crowd presses in on you, and yet you ask, who touched me? But Jesus didn't laugh. He had stopped. His eyes searched, not for a face, but for a faith. She froze. The bleeding had stopped, but now her heart pounded like thunder. She wasn't allowed to be there. She wasn't allowed to touch, but she knew the touch was real. And he knew silence. The kind of silence that stands on the edge of eternity. Then, trembling, she fell at his feet, and there, before the crowd, she spoke the truth. The years, the pain, the shame, the hope, each tear was a sentence, each word was a lifetime. And Jesus, with eyes that pierced time and wounds, said, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." He didn't just heal her body, he called her daughter. The woman with no name was now named by God. The world had defined her by what she carried. Jesus defined her by who she became. She wasn't just healed, she was restored. In that moment, she was no longer the woman with the issue of blood, not the unclean one, not the forgotten. She was daughter. She was seen. She was free. Jesus continued on his way. So did the crowd. But she stood there for a moment holding her own body as if testing the reality. She had touched. She had been touched. And something no one else could see except him had changed forever. She went home, but not as the same woman. The streets looked new. The sky seemed bluer. The faces of people less threatening. An ethereal moment. The woman stands still at the threshold of her home, framed by the doorway. She pauses before entering, a soft expression of reverence and disbelief on her face. The interior glows faintly, symbolizing that her world and soul have changed. And that night, and when all was quiet, she wept, but not from pain. She wept from recognition. She wept because she finally knew who she was. And that night, when all was quiet, she wept, but not from pain. She wept from recognition, from seeing herself, from finally knowing who she was. For years, she had been defined by illness, by blood, by silence. But now, a new name was written on her heart, daughter. And that name was spoken not by doctors or priests, but by the Son of God himself. She lay down in peace, not peace from the absence of struggle, but peace from the presence of God. And as the stars lit the sky, she remembered that moment, the crowd, the touch, the healing, the voice. Daughter, your faith has healed you. It was more than a physical miracle. It was the redemption of an entire story. She had lost everything and found everything. Close-up of a Middle Eastern woman's hand, holding a glowing thread, symbolic as if from Jesus' robe. The light is faint but divine. Her fingers are gentle, reverent, ultra-realistic texture and emotion, biblical symbolism. And in silence, she knew her story would outlive her, that other women would one day hear about a silent faith that touched the impossible, and that the touch of Christ would still be there for anyone bold enough to believe.